What's up? Today, I'm going to show you how to make your own effects in Ableton. All right, so just so you guys know in advance here, I'm not going to be doing anything too crazy. We're not going to be using any synthesizers or things of that nature. I'm just going to be showing you guys how I make my own unique effects. The only things that I'm using here are stock plugins and samples that I've gotten off Splice or other sample packs. So I have 3 samples that I'm going to show you guys sort of how I worked around these samples to make them into their own effects. So this first one we have here is a dry glass break sound. So pretty standard here. I just used an EQ8, and what I do when I'm making effects for the first time, like an impact, I'll use a lot of reverb and delay, and I'll really crank the decay time and maybe drop the dry wet a little bit, and then I'll just dial up the feedback, play with the filter, and then adjust the dry wet as needed, and then switch it to fade or ping pong if I want that sort of like side to side presence. And without the rack, it sounds like this. I'll play it again for you guys. And with the rack, it sounds like this. So if you're looking to make your own impacts, crashes, things of that nature, I definitely recommend not only obviously using the EQ8 to roll off the low end, but then using your reverb and your delay to then create a lot of that space and distance that you're looking for in a good impact effect. Moving on to sample 2 here, I'll show you guys what we are working with. So here I made a riser. And how I did that was I actually took this clap sample here. Let me take this off. And it's just a really hard clap sound. And what I did was I slapped a reverb on there, and I increased the decay time all the way up and the dry wet all the way up to 100%. And then it makes the clap sound like this. So obviously that sounds absolutely terrible. But how I got this sort of frozen effect here is I just right-clicked once I had the desired effect, and then I hit freeze track. And then if it freezes the arrangement properly, you should have this like blue looking thing here. And then all you do is you just hit flatten. And then you can see here, this was the effect that I had down here. And then I just turned warping off, and then I reversed it. And actually, no, I didn't turn warping off on this, yeah. But I still had warping on, and then I just had this sample reversed. So that instead of it turning into like this really long like crash impact sound, I then reversed it so that it became a riser instead of a fall. And then I added some more effects on it just to give it that zero, like really small into this big like crescendo sound that I was really looking to get in any sort of riser. And how I did that was I used an EQ to start, and then I used a filter here to bring in the sound. So it sounds like this. And then I also added some auto pan here at the end just to give it that little bit of left to right, just to have a little more movement to the sound. Dude, I just ate. Shit. My roommate just brought me a bunch of pizza. Shit. Now I'm gonna get fat. That's some good shit. And then lastly, we are on to my final and favorite riser that I have for the day. So I have a couple things going on here. I have this white noise loop that I have, and I actually ended up not using the EQ here just because I was in a rush, to be honest. But what I'll do is I'll roll off the low end like I usually do. And then I used an auto filter like I did on my last effect that I showed you guys. So I just have it going on like a nice crescendo just to allow the sound to slowly come in. But what's important to take away for this one is that I'm using some transposition modulation to then change the pitch of the sound just to kind of make it a little more unique and not as flat as some of the other risers and impacts that I had in the last 2 examples. So transposition is basically just transposing and changing the pitch of something. So what we're doing is we're gradually changing the pitch of our sample just to make the riser a little more unique and have this cool sort of build effect. So how to transpose the sample here, I always put it in complex, it sounds the best, or beats mode if you're just using a standard drum loop or something like that. But I usually stick to complex. And then you want to click on this little kind of like point bar thing here. And then under envelopes, you want to go to clip, and then you'll have volume, and then you want to select transposition. So here, it just shows up as a standard automation. So without this automation, the sound comes through pretty flat. It's just at a standard 0. There's no pitch change, anything like that. But what I did here was I dropped it 2 whole semitones, and then, or I would say octave. I dropped it 2 whole octaves, and then I brought it back up to its original pitch here at the end of the riser. And then I finished it off with some simple volume automation. Just started at -20 and brought it up to 0. And then my final effect was done. So yeah, just a quick recap here to finish everything off. The first one we went over, I use a lot of reverb and delay to make those impact effects. And in the second one, I use a lot of freezing, flattening, and then reversing of the sounds to make my risers. And then finally, I use a lot of transposition modulation to change the pitch and then help sort of increase that crescendo sound that I'm looking to get in a riser. Alrighty, ladies and gents, that wraps it up for today's video. Hopefully you learned something new. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, all of that good stuff, and I'll be back next week with a video showing you guys all of my preferred third-party plugins that I use to make my DJ edits. But until then, take it easy, tell someone you love them, all of that good stuff, and I'll be back soon.